All right, we're going to get started. Welcome back. We're deep in the middle of the holiday season. We got Christmas coming up, which is awesome. We got a New Year's, something or other, whatever you do on New Year's, just don't end up face planted down somewhere in a snowdrift, please. We want to see you back here in our January event, right? Anyway, we put these on once a month here in the Grain Belt Brewery building, and we are Capsule, a special projects agency. We have wonderful guests on the stage for you this evening. Randy Hunt is here, right? Awesome. Ben Erwin is on the big screen from Charity Buzz. You'll have plenty of time to talk later. Let's see. I want to make sure I do the announcements for the sponsors, so I get some credit to RSP Architects, who designed this beautiful space and allows us to live here in this environment. We love this office. It's amazing. Specifically, Derek McCallum, who recently was in Vogue magazine. Yes, I said that. Derek McCallum was in Vogue magazine. Look it up. It's cool. Or someone will send it to you. Lake One, which is our shyest sponsor, never shows up. He's not ever here, right? Ryan Rudd. Call him out. Actually, if you could search Ryan Rudd on LinkedIn and send him a LinkedIn message, say, Ryan Rudd, I'd like to meet you. I've heard you're the shyest sponsor of the Capsule Think and Link event. August Ash, developer friends who've done great things with our firm over the years. And then we, of course, have Abby, co-host, dressed in the proper attire for the evening. And then Dustin Studelska, Stud. He's also a doctor, so he's essentially a doctor stud. I don't know. Something. Anyway, that went flat, didn't it? Yeah. You do what you can.
I don't think we're gonna have that one stick around.
That was not gonna stick around. The other co-host. But before we get going on that, I want to make sure that I do the drawing for the free poster. We have our values posters that are up there on the wall that the design team designed over the course of the year. We turned 25. They're freaking awesome. And we give one away every month. Jenna Redfield gets this month's. Hey, Jenna, thank you. Enjoy. You get the pick of the lot. And I don't know where you pick them up, but not there. Somewhere over there, perhaps. Someone will get you. Anyway, congrats. And take it away.
Thank you, Aaron. Going to have a great conversation today. My name is Dustin Studelska. I work at Capsule with Aaron. I'm the brand communication strategist. Do a lot of research, do a lot of writing, all things strategy, verging on creative. I'm here with Abby Kelsey.
Hello, I'm Abby Kelsey. I am the CEO of Marketers Community and then also a social media consultant for my own business, Always Social. Excited to be here today. Is this loud? Wow. Okay. If I get too loud, if I get too excited over here, you guys let me know, okay?
Our two awesome guests today start with Randy Hunt in person. He's the head of design at Notion. If you haven't used Notion, it's a really flexible, I call it a productivity platform, but a tool you can use for all sorts of different things, from individual organization to management of all sorts at an enterprise level. Randy will tell us all about that. He's also the chair of the MFA of Design at the School of Visual Design in New York. So is extraordinarily steeped in design, not just in his day job, but in his intellectual life, I'm sure. He's held design positions, VP of Design at Etsy, and according to his LinkedIn, head of design at least 3 other firms. So we're very glad to have someone with such an excellent reputation here with us today. On the big screen, Ben Erwin, former CEO at Charitybuzz, and he worked at Charitybuzz for 18 years. If you're not familiar with Charitybuzz, it's a platform that connects you with really cool experiences in a marketplace type setting where the proceeds go to charity. Ben will tell us about why that's a really neat thing. He's been a contributing writer for a number of platforms, as well as contributed a lot of leadership to the individual companies that merged into Charitybuzz. So he's been in the space for quite some time, a really rich perspective as well. So just want to welcome you two, and welcome you to just give a brief introduction if there's anything I missed, anything you want to say about your background, how you got to where you are. Randy, go ahead.
Okay, sure. I will make it brief. Well, let's say I'm a kind of cross-disciplinary, design generalist, I'd say. But I believe that like my approach to design, and it's reflective in the sort of team we've built at Notion, it's reflective of some of the teams I've built in the past, is one in which we are both sort of generalist and deep across many areas, which some would think is either not possible or is a poor way to kind of do things, but we're just so obsessed with making things and making them sort of well crafted and well received by people. And we think about them as sort of contributions to culture over time that, I don't know, we do whatever the hard work is to kind of learn many disciplines. And so how that shows up at Notion today is we really love building software. We're designers that really, really love software. And I believe that kind of shows through in the tool and product that we build. We're quite capable at a visual communication level, at interaction design level, but also a vast majority of our team sort of write production code, and we deploy code on the regular to our many, many millions of customers around the world. And so we have a direct sort of control over the medium and an ability to impact customers' experience in ways that are pretty easy and feel really empowered. When you combine all that stuff together, you can often make great stuff happen. So there's a lot of other background stuff, but that's a good headline.
That's perfect starting point. Ben, welcome. If you want to say a little bit more about yourself, how you got to where you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I kind of stumbled into the purpose-driven marketplace world after graduating college. I was met with a fork in the road. I think many were back in 2005, where you had a decision either to go figure out how to make a bunch of money or figure out how to struggle and make the world a better place. And I naively thought that the path was pretty clear. Just go figure out a way to make a bunch of money. And I quickly realized that was going to be a miserable experience if there wasn't purpose and meaning in my career. And I stumbled into Charitybuzz when it was just an idea of just taking auctions from a gala format and distributing them over the internet just to get more participation and more money raised. And I fell in love with it because it merged those two paths together. It's for-profit business model. There was a lot of growth. It was an industry in a space that it didn't exist before, really the intersection of for-profit and social good. And we built it from an idea into a pretty large organization, went through a couple acquisitions. We diversified the business by acquiring a few other marketplaces. And what I'm most proud of is over that time, we've raised $650 million of incremental funding for charities, all through the idea of offering a money can't buy experiences. How do you compel people to give more? Because we're basically at the capacity of giving in this country. And I'm just always looking at more purpose-driven ideas, opportunities, ways to do things differently and ultimately more effectively.
Great. So those of you in the room, those of you watching on the live stream, you may be wondering, well, these guys are awesome, but what do they have to do with one another? But Ben, I think you just sort of encapsulated that in one of your phrases, like, how do you get someone to do X? How do you get someone to do the thing you want them to do? Our notion is that, our thought is that.
No, we love this. You can say that as much as you want.
That was an honest slip. Our thought is that design has a lot to do with it, whether it's of a product, an experience, a business model. So the phrase I'll put in front of you is that good design is good business. Does that seem true in your perspective? And if so, like, how have you lived that out? How has your business life lived that out?
Well, okay. First, I think this is a great lead. I'm glad you sort of referenced that quote. I mean, there's a quote from the quote, good design is good business, comes originally from, or at least as much as we can attribute to it, an internal memo at IBM from, his name Thomas Watson? Is that right? And I believe, gosh, when is this dated? It long predates the conversation of kind of design being important in the business context in the popular dialogue. This must have been in early 60s or something. He wrote this internal memo. And so that little snippet is the one that's traveled around because it's a good little earworm. Good design is good business, and we repeat it. But there's probably, 2 or 3 other paragraphs worth of content in that memo. And in it, he talks about the design of offices and the employee experience. He talks about the importance of packaging and sort of the designed experience in like marketing and communications. And he talks about design of like the product itself. And so it's a very whole view of how design is impactful and important in both shaping how people perceive the thing and then the actions that they take afterwards. So when you go back to then, like, how do you get people to do the thing you wish they would do? I love that you pulled that quote. It's a really strong through line. Then if you want them to do those things and you believe those things are good for your business, then therefore design is good for your business. Yeah. We try to take that same, same approach. I think what is important is that at Notion, we don't just give sort of lip service to design being important. Like our founder and CEO, Ivan Zhao, he is a designer and a builder and maker by kind of personality and disposition. And he designed the early versions of Notion. It's just like in our DNA. And that informs a lot of company culture things that then, give us the space and permission and sort of belief to invest in design. Because there's sort of we're not having to sell or convince anyone that we need to do it. It's sort of a belief, and we start from there. Maybe I'll say it's just sort of imbued in everything, and then we can get maybe to some more specifics.
One of the things I like that you were kind of hinting at is that design is an intentional thing. It's not happening by accident. Your business isn't going to flourish by accident. It takes these intentional choices. That's part of the core of design. Like the intentional choice to set up a charity organization built on for-profit principles. So Ben, maybe just tell us a little bit about how that worked, like in a little bit more depth. Like, what was it like to undertake that in a world that charity simply means something else?
Yeah, so I agree. This was a really good question. It made me think a lot because I don't identify as a designer. So as I was preparing for this conversation, I went into my dictionary and I was looking up the definition of design. And the one that really stuck with me was it's to devise something for a specific function or end. So there's intentionality right there. So if we think about design through that definition, it's the backbone of any business. It's results oriented, and everything I do as a leader and an operator revolves around good design. Your strategic plan, the formation and creation of your team, structuring a marketplace, inventory assortment, media strategy, you name it. Design is what is the impetus for the entire plan, initiative, and more importantly, how are you going to measure whether or not what you're doing is successful? So we designed Charitybuzz to figure out a way to unlock more money for charity. The charity fundraising landscape is as antiquated and as analog as anything on this planet. And we believe a world where more money flows to charitable organizations will create better outcomes for everyone. So how do we design a business that can still adhere to capitalist principles, can still be able to incentivize people and results the way that the most successful companies in the world operate? But how can we center and design that to be able to achieve these better outcomes that we wanted to create for our partners and everyone else involved? And that's how we've unlocked all of these additional and incremental dollars for good causes. It all stemmed from design. So I really think about design as being a fundamental to any business, especially successful ones. It's not a department. It's not an aesthetic. It's not designed for the sake of design. It's all around being results oriented and staying super focused on what your goal is.
Even in like preparing for this conversation, I never had personally thought about design in that way. I mean, at the end of the day, design is all about, no matter what it is, you're designing it to influence a behavior, right? A behavior, an experience. And so I just love both of your takes on that because it is so refreshing that it's not just about the look of something, right? It's about the entire user experience and what you're trying to get them to feel and do.
I mean, there's really there's a stack from top to bottom, or well, if it's a stack, there's a set of sort of of processes and situations, even for like a user or the internal organization, that all have to come together, or when they come together, it's sort of optimal. And some of them missing, it doesn't really make sense. So like the architecture of the software, right? Influences how the team behaves around it and what they feel like they can do easily or differently. That has a direct lineup to then, how easy is it to change that thing? Well, how easy it is to change it impacts how you can adjust to what you learn from users and how quickly those feedback loops can happen, and how quickly those can happen changes what you like either need to or have the opportunity to communicate or frame to your audience from a communication standpoint. It all kind of adds up. And so it's very difficult to get the sort of ideal experience or realize the full potential of something if you only view those things as sort of separate, independent things of each other. I mean, to Ben's point, if you view it as a department, or only a department, it can be a department, but if you view it only as a department, you miss all the connective tissue where these things influence each other sort of up and down the stack. I've just shared, this is just like an aside, but so you understand my enthusiasm for this. Like I've worked on many multi-sided marketplaces. So I have a lot of appreciation for what Ben's built and the experience. And I've been a customer of Charitybuzz as well. And so there's more like in my heart, maybe there's like a connection, not just this like topic of design, but I really have, it's a very difficult thing to, multi-sided marketplaces are really, oops, my battery's good. Okay. Multi-sided marketplaces are a really challenging thing to make work. And to have sort of such an arc of like continuous growth and progress and integrating things, sort of integrating other businesses or other inventory over time. I just have a ton of respect for. So it's really fun to be having this conversation with Ben. Just important for you to know that. Yeah.
So let's stay high level for a minute. And Ben, on our prep call, you had just this really interesting phrase about what it means for Charitybuzz to be doing what it's doing. And you talked about realism versus idealism, not just in charity in general, but sort of the nonprofit space and like what it means to build with that principle in mind, realism. Explain a bit what you meant, because I think it was fascinating and it itself speaks to the sort of realities of design and how to think about the world with a design lens.
Yeah, so this is something I think applies very exclusively to the charity space, but I do believe it has applications outside of the nonprofit world as well. So when I talk about idealism versus realism, I think about it as idealism designs for the world we wish existed, but realism designs for the world we actually live in. So I'll give a really good example. So back in the 70s, they started to measure the percentage of GDP that was donated to charitable organizations in the United States. It was 2%. In 2025, it's 2%. So all of the references that just this generation is more philanthropic than the previous generation, and that happening in every subsequent generation, it actually doesn't pan out when we're talking about the actual relative amount of money going to good causes. Yet the number of charities over that time has increased by 40x. So you've got the same size of the pie, but the slices are way smaller. And I think that really describes idealism and the limits of it. It's we all want more money to go to charity. I think everybody could agree, sure, it'd be great if more money went to charity, but that idealistic point of view creates 2% of GDP and it hasn't changed. And we have to pay attention to the data. So I think when you take more of a realist approach, again, it's designing for results. So how do you get more money to go to charity? And we do that, you can take intentionality out of the picture. We don't have to worry about whether or not somebody is donating money for the purest of intentions or not. We just care about whether or not more money is going into the hands of organizations whose missions are designed to solve the most critical problems affecting all of us. And that was a big unlock for us, because when you think about the charity fundraising space, the appeal is always critical, it's cause centric, but it's limiting because every cause has a very small percentage of the population that resonates or connects with it. We sell experiences, or we sold experiences. I'm still getting used to transitioning into a new opportunity. We sold experiences with the most famous and influential people in the world. Go have dinner in Lake Como with George and Amal Clooney. Go on a motorcycle ride with Bruce Springsteen. Hang out with Tim Cook at Apple headquarters. Now you're expanding the pool to people who just want to do really cool stuff. And whether or not they're purchasing these experiences for tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars because they care deeply about the organization, we don't necessarily care as long as the money makes it into the bank account of the organization that we know can deploy it the most effectively. That's a realist way of thinking about how do we get more money to charity. I don't think it takes the place of idealism. I think they both can coexist, but idealism alone, we know what it does. It's 2% of GDP. And I think we can all agree, especially today, more money needs to go to these organizations than ever before, because it's not like the world's in a much better place than it was 50 years ago.
I just have to say, Ben, it's such a refreshing take on it, right? I love the fact that you're like, you're not always going to find that person that cares so much about something, but if you can give them something that they want, and in return, you get to then give that to an organization that needs it to then go into the hands of people that need it, it's the outcome. And so I had to comment. I love that.
So part of what you're saying, Ben, is actually intentionality is maybe something we can design around. What if it doesn't matter that people care or not about a certain outcome if we can get there anyway? Randy,
Exactly.
Randy, curious for your reaction as someone who works with a very different set of tools, perhaps. But how do you feel in user experience design and product design? Like, how do you think through that sort of intention when you're crafting something, you're trying to get a certain outcome or at least enable a certain experience? Think through that with us.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll maybe briefly comment on kind of the business intent in a way, which is part of that stack in there, but it's maybe like the sort of logical bridge, which is, we want people to use the product, love using the product, and keep using the product. We're a subscription software product, and so, the business works in a very simple way. You get value out of it, you keep paying. You get more value out of it, you would pay more, and you'd extend it to your team. So the incentives are quite aligned. It's it's quite simple. It's different than working in maybe a ad back kind of like revenue model or some other things where you're kind of triangulate more. So the value exchange is pretty clear then. So what the business wants to have happen is just people come, use, continue to use, like it, tell other people, basically. When we think about then crafting that experience from a sort of, user experience design standpoint, well, one, we're a very unique kind of tool. On the surface, people come to us to kind of help them get some work done. We like to say we help people we make beautiful tools for people's life's work. And this is an important idea because the tool is highly configurable, which to some people can be very attractive and to some people can be kind of scary. Often people fall in that spectrum somewhere in between. But because it is highly configurable, it allows you to adapt it for your purpose and your needs. And so it operates sort of at many scales and in many types of work. So we have sort of wall-to-wall every employee and customer at very large enterprises, 10,000 users plus, all using Notion as their sort of primary knowledge store, productivity tool, wiki, project management, CRM. It's kind of the operating system for the company. And we also have people who use it, to keep track of their to-do list for the day, sort of in their personal life. There's lots of interesting things that happen in between. People sort of get obsessed with the tool or love it in ways they almost build, family operating system. We have the students and universities and things who use it, at some kind of operational complexity between those things. And so our intention there is to have people understand or experience. Great. I appreciate your responsiveness. Have people understand enough of the value or the promise for them to get them to start using it. Right? And then when they do that, get them to understand enough of the value or experience it to use it a little more. Because it's capable of doing so much, you can't kind of put that all at someone right out the gate. That's like too complicated. But we do need to kind of tease or reveal the capability sort of over time. And so you do that in a few different ways. We do it through some storytelling and narrative things, right? You have sort of customer examples and things like this. Then we have things like, kind of templates, and you have sort of like working examples. There's a whole community that shares kind of preset configurations in a way for how you might set up Notion to work for like your business or your use case. And there's a great little commercial ecosystem there too, where people actually build and sell these templates to each other. And then we have experiences in the software that kind of nudge you and reveal what's possible over time. Prompts that encourage you to take a next action that might be like the thing you're trying to do. And so in these cases, we need to kind of be open to people expressing their own intent, and then have sort of thought of a system and executed on the system such that we can kind of respond to that. Thankfully, software is, can work that way. So it's the business through line and the user experience through line at a high level are pretty straightforward, but the nuances at an individual user level get pretty, pretty in the weeds in a way that for us is really fun. As designers, we like kind of managing, like taking hold of the complexity and trying to keep it simple. Yeah.
Can I ask a clear? Okay, so with Notion, there's a big community out there. There's people that, they are building, and they are also then making careers out of helping other people build. People that go to bat for it's almost like you have like your own like spokesman of like the community. Like it's a very strong community. Do you guys take that into consideration, or how do you kind of bring that into design at the company?
Yeah, we absolutely do. We have a group of we have loosely what we would call our community. Many people around the world. We have people who opt into something we call like our ambassador program, and we often test and prototype features with our ambassador community, and we understand them as kind of like different scales, like kind of types of businesses or users or customers that they either represent or they themselves work with. And so we can opt them into things. And so there's a lot of kind of co-design activity that happens as we validate early ideas with them. We can even validate kind of pricing ideas. We can validate user experience ideas. And they're a very important part of our sort of product development process overall. But interestingly, we also have a kind of, how would I say? We have a pretty clear view of where we want things to go and what we believe the possibilities of the software are in the future. And so what we look to do is use the community to help us understand like the priority and sequencing of those things, how well they might be received. But we're usually not sourcing for the brand new idea. Like we've got a pretty clear roadmap that we've been chipping away at for a long time, and like each new thing kind of makes it possible. But they become very integral in us knowing how well we're doing at some of those things and which things may be helpful to have happen better or in different sequences. Yep.
Yeah, very cool.
So one of the things you said in your just previous response there, Randy, was the value, like you're trying to build in flexibility so someone can act on their intention and get to where they want to go. But the value to them has to be clear. The immediate value to them has to be clear. So I'm wondering, Ben, like in this situation where the value is getting to meet George Clooney, you know, and the person who bids on that might not know what charity that money is going to. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. What sorts of insights about the audience do you use to sort of prioritize those experiences to come up with new experiences? Is it just kind of a pipeline of celebrities, or is there data you're playing off of that says like, actually, right now, Bruce Springsteen is going to be big?
Yeah, it's a combination. So, you have the benefit of being able to respond to anything that's trending in real time and hopefully capitalize on these moments where the stock or the market for access to a certain person, place, or event will yield a much higher amount of money and also awareness and promotion for the organization. So we definitely had quite a few people in the office who were pop culture aficionados. And it was a fun part of it is kind of would understand what the zeitgeist was at the moment and then figure out who can we reach out to try to get access to this particular opportunity. But more of what we did at a higher level is pretty similar to, I'd say, any retail or e-commerce company is always iterate on who our ICPs are, build out our archetypes, understand how that overlaps with the audience and their bidding and purchasing behavior, and then focus on inventory assortment in response. So, for example, we had offices, New York and LA. Those were our major points. And most of the organizations we work with headquartered in New York or LA because they would have the most connectivity to the people, places, and events we would want to list on the site. Well, an interesting insight was, but therefore, people who reside in New York or LA who are affluent are less interested and excited about these opportunities because they're kind of already in the inner circle. So what we found was going to secondary and tertiary markets throughout the US and finding the big fish in relatively smaller ponds was the best way for us to get somebody who's coming to New York for a weekend and they wanted to go to Rayo's and get a reservation, go to the best Broadway show, meet the cast, etc. So then we were starting to really understand what are they interested in. We had a lot of one-on-one conversations with our top customers so that we could really figure out where is the demand peaking, and then how do we meet that with the right amount of supply at the right moment. And then just to your previous point about intentionality, one thing that was really important and continues to be important is we would always try to convert a buyer from someone who just wanted access to this person, place, or thing into a supporter. So the way I would think about it is, we can just keep using George Clooney as an example, is if I'm giving somebody the opportunity to meet George Clooney and they're spending a ridiculous amount of money, that moment where they get to meet him is probably the greatest single moment to convert them into a donor to that organization. So how do we then layer in stories about, hey, this is awesome, you're meeting your idol, your favorite actor, but did you know that the funds that you spent in order to be able to fulfill this experience is actually helping to fund a team of lawyers around the world who are aiming all of their sights and efforts to take down the worst offenders of human rights abuses across the globe. And that would be a really great recipe to turn somebody into a fan, into a supporter, and then that could exist far after the experience concludes.
Wow, I love that. I think that's great. So having the forethought to think about how the relationship continues, how the support continues, because obviously, I guess it depends on your customer base, but most people, this once in a lifetime thing is probably not that much more than once in a lifetime thing that they're doing, perhaps. So figuring out a way to how to make that continue is a really interesting challenge. But it reminds me of something you said, Randy, in our previous call, which was that design can be a little bit like a magic trick. And by that, I took you didn't mean deceptive, but it can enable things you actually didn't think that weren't possible before in a given moment, and it can actually delight in a way that you didn't expect. So can you tell us a little bit about the value of that sort of delightful aspect in continuing someone along the path you're trying to get them on?
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. There's, at least in design circles that I've been a part of for a long time, there is a phrase that's become, I think, sort of so overused that it's like lost its meaning. There's sort of like moments of delight that would start to get like layered into things. I think its origin and the intent is right, but I think it gets, it kind of turned into like, and then you hit the button and graffiti or like confetti happens. I mean, graffiti would be more interesting. You get to some point and the confetti happens, which is a perfectly lovely thing to have happen. And I'm complicit in making that happen and things. It's not a criticism of that specifically, but more this idea that you can kind of sprinkle something in and it's often like visual and then hooray, now people like it more. But there's something in that, in the spirit of it, that I think is about the timing and the behavior shaping that I think, sort of in the anecdote Ben shared, which is there are sometimes it's moments when people aren't expecting something, and then it happens, and that kind of surprise has some kind of psychological effects, maybe the like magic trick kind of thing. And it becomes very memorable because of that thing that happened. And when you're trying to create change over time, like it's not always getting somebody to act in the moment. It's getting them to sort of like remember the thing or have the positive association to act in the future. Sometimes that action is telling other people about it. You get this sort of like word of mouth growth, but other times it's them making a decision to go back and try or use or reuse an aspect of the in our case, the software, the product. So as a great example of this, we have, for years now, and it's funny to say because AI feels so new, but our first sort of AI features were integrated in the product about 3 years ago now. But as we updated things about 2 years ago, we have the sort of Notion AI experience. We introduced this kind of character in a way. There's a face that represents the activity of AI. It's kind of a cartoon face. It's quite lovely. If you're not familiar with our product, you should check it out. If you know our product, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That the amount of kind of craft in the execution of this little cartoon face, one, it seems kind of absurd for a company that sells like enterprise software to companies to have this at all and then invest this amount of energy in it, except that it legitimately surprises people in a way that is very satisfying to them. It gives them like they smile, they chuckle, they tell other people about it, they screen capture it and put it on social. But it's not just that it exists and it's cute and it's animated. It's all the animation is scripted and it exists at a software level. So we give inputs into it and we get like state back out of it. So you do certain activity in the software and it behaves certain ways. So it functions as like this loading state. It functions as this sort of transitional moment. It also just sort of continuously can surprise and delight. And that's born originally, I think, from some intuition that's like, wouldn't it be nice to make this more human or more interesting? And then as you start to try those things and experience them yourself and you react back to it and you're like, oh, that is really satisfying. Then we start to invest in it more deeply because we believe that the response we're having will be like the response other people will have. And that's where you start to get this sort of it's like long-term behavior shaping that becomes actually very strategically important. But on the surface, it feels almost like this playful gesture. Like, oh, here's a little fun thing. Goes back to that kind of like moment of delight, but it's actually like the deep investment in caring about things like that over a long arc and sort of continuing to enrich them that leads people down a path later and sort of influences their future behavior. We do have, data, and we can do some analysis to see people who interact with this and see it and what things they do next. But it didn't start from a place of trying to, measure our way towards it. We sort of, we focus first on something we believe will be compelling kind of at an emotional level. And then we try to learn from and optimize it at a more data-informed level later. Yeah.
I think it's crazy to think about things that we just experience every single day. If it's AI, if it's a tool, if it's a website, whatever it is, I never stop to think like, oh, how much work went into this? We just kind of expect it now. Or like if we want something to operate a certain way, we want it to operate that way. We get upset if it doesn't. Or like something that's cool, we just think, oh, that was cool. That was a cool user experience. Or like, that made me smile. But like, you don't think about all of the things that go into the back end of that and probably years of kind of bringing that to life.
Yes. That's true. Yeah.
So you're shifting the way people think and act with Notion.
Yeah.
Ben, my question to you is, do you feel Charitybuzz and the work it's done has pushed, I'm going to call it the charity industry because I don't know what else to call it, the charity industry in a meaningful direction? Meaning, has it been successful enough where now people will maybe expect to get something back? It's not donating, it's an experience. I can buy an experience and the money goes someplace good. Like, do you feel there's been any kind of shift in the culture of giving writ large?
Probably a small amount, but unfortunately not as much as there needs to be. So we were pretty deliberate in the way that we built the business, where we weren't asking or depending on charities to innovate, modernize, and grow. We simply were building a platform and made it really easy for them to plug into it. And whether or not they knew they were doing this or wanted to do this, they were modernizing their fundraising approach. So a lot of that is based on just a really deep and intimate understanding of the charity sector. If you really think about it, I think there's 3 or 4 lines in our tax code that creates this massive differentiation between for-profit and nonprofit organizations. When people think about charity, I think especially now around the holidays, you think about the Salvation Army volunteers around department stores dancing and asking people to just drop their spare change into a bucket. So I think at a much larger level, what needs to happen is a societal change. These aren't organizations that just require your spare change because they're volunteering their time and they're trying to do a good job. We're asking these organizations to solve the most pressing problems facing our society. Go cure cancer, reform education, save the planet, feed the homeless, and the list goes on and on. But I want you to do it I want you to be blindfolded. I want your arms and legs to be tied behind your back. And oh, by the way, you can't make any money. And when you don't succeed, we're going to criticize you beyond belief. Like, who's signing up for that job? But I think if we can start really thinking of that as impact-focused organizations, we can fund them, we can incentivize them to innovate. We have a much better chance at solving these problems. I mean, we see it every day. Companies like Notion or any of the top technology companies, they have a recipe for how to innovate, grow, and get things done. None of that, virtually none of that has made its way into the charity sector. You're seeing more and more organizations starting to pop up that are being founded by people who used to work at a lot of these really successful companies, and they're bringing those principles in. But for the most part, it's unfortunately still a lot of the same old practices and ideals, and that's what's really limiting the sector as a whole from being able to really grow and become a better version of themselves.
Appreciate that perspective. So we're at the time in the talk where we're going to turn it over to the audience for some questions, and maybe they can steer us in a rosier direction. I'm sorry I kind of ended on that one. Realistic, not a bummer. It's just realistic. So if you all have questions in our room today, we're happy to bring you a mic.
Hey, Ben. Hi. Oh, wow. Okay. Ben, I love the clear-eyed view. I'm curious if there are rules of thumb or principles that you think need to make that transition from innovation organizations over into the charity space, kind of rules of thumb or things like that.
That's a good question. I think a big part of this is, I think about capitalism as the most modern, the most powerful force in the modern world. Capitalism will drive people to do more than anything else. And the charity sector is completely devoid of any capitalistic tendencies or principles. I don't think it necessarily needs to become a capitalist sector. But what we do need, again, I think, is a shift in the societal narrative of what charities are and what they aren't. There's no incentives for taking risks. Charities don't go out of business. Charities don't merge. Charities don't consolidate. During the 48 minutes we've been on this Think and Link, it's probably 20 new charities that have been established in the United States of America. Do we need 20 more charities that are all doing the same thing? I think one of the largest advancements we can have in the sector is better transparency over which organizations are doing the best job. We've got analysts and we've got public markets that tell us all which companies are a buy or a sell. But when it comes to charities, if you're really focused on figuring out which organization is the best at providing advocacy for breast cancer in low income neighborhoods, you have no chance, no way whatsoever of figuring out which is the charity that is deserving of your money. So to make this a little more rosy, I actually believe that people want to do more and give more. I think they don't have the tools to empower them to be able to invest their money in the organizations and then be able to receive an accountability report of, hey, together this money helped us do X, Y, and Z, and here's our plan for the next 3 years. They all need a roadmap like Notion does, and they can share that roadmap. You can get feedback from your donors. Right now, a lot of these organizations are more like a black hole, and I think that's what's preventing people from giving more, because there is definitely a lack of trust in how the money is being spent and how it's progressing against their mission.
Awesome. Ben, we already mentioned that you're former Charitybuzz. I want to get you to promise to tell us where you're going when we know, and you can say it because I'd love to see that. Whatever you do is going to be very interesting. I'm sure of that. So we'll put it in the YouTube channel and the link, like they do, the kids do, the link down there to find out where you've gone. And Randy, I want you to tell us about the jackets, the jacket that I admire that I can't get, apparently. The design, if you're really into design, you notice the details, and they design fucking everything at Notion, the building, the space, the onboarding experience, everything. So tell us about the jackets.
Okay. Well, every Notion employee sort of issued this sort of it's like a chore jacket. It's kind of styled off of like a French sort of French work jacket. Unique design made from a clothing maker in San Francisco, and there's sort of generations of these jackets. One, the design gets tweaked a little bit as we kind of like learn and improve, but also each time there's sort of a new colorway. They're very subtle. They just have a small Notion patch on the sleeve. I'm not wearing one right now, but we'll put a link in the comments so you can see them. They're because the color changes each generation. They also kind of like mark time. So you can see when people sort of join the organization. So of course there's more of the more recent colors as we've grown as an organization, but also, it's an interesting version of sort of composing the design experience and also allowing participation. So inside the company, we vote on like what the next color should be, but those colors are also constrained within sort of a palette. So you'd imagine with a lot of what we call internally notinos, which is just Notion with the letters rearranged. Notinos sort of gather and are wearing the jackets. They all, make sense together. It's all very aesthetically pleasing, which of course is satisfying to us at the eye, but is also a symbolic and an indication of sort of the thoughtfulness and the care and the sort of the foresight in all of the things that we do. It's just like, to your point, design considerations from top to bottom. Yeah.
It's kind of like a magic trick, right? Like if everyone comes together and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, we didn't expect that.
I have a thank you and a question. The thank you, first of all, for the intentionality with the Notion AI design. It really comes through the personification, the little ducky that's on mine to grab my attention to it. We purchased Notion AI earlier this year with we have a very attached Notion employee base, but we purchased Notion AI, and ultimately there's behavior changes, number one, when it comes to enterprise AI adoption. And so as you said, your business goals are directly aligned with mine. I want Notion AI to be the first place people think of when they have any question, because it will give them the best answer and it won't require any human to answer that. So there's my thank you. My question is sort of about the design team of the future. You mentioned you pride yourself on having a team of generalists, and I work with a lot of UX teams. I'm seeing a change in the structure of teams and the role of leadership in the scope of roles. So I'm curious to have you elaborate a little bit more on like the bounds of that generalism.
Yeah, sure. The bounds of the generalism for the design team. Well, and yes, things are changing, and I think that there's sort of the AI provocation at this, which says, because of a number of capabilities of AI, let's talk about sort of coding agents at one level, which says you no longer, or many times, don't need to directly manipulate software code in order to develop, which means that a lot of people who are either don't know how or have only a cursory knowledge can now kind of chat with an agent or make requests and have software created for them. So that says your designer can now be your engineer, a product person can be an engineer. And on the other end, you have kind of, designers who are primarily working in visual canvas kinds of tools, or as one of their main tools for a long time. And now you can kind of talk to those tools through an agent and get visual output by having sort of language input. So that says, oh, your engineer can be a designer, your product person can be a designer. So there's all these kind of blurring edge possibilities. Some, research, great. Well, in particular, synthesis. I mean, large language models are extremely good at analyzing text and finding commonalities and similarities and synthesis. So from a research standpoint, it's quite powerful, and I think it can, you can blur the line to both builders, sometimes I would say like designers and engineers being more actively involved in research, but you also have researchers being able to, take maybe insights or proposed changes or learnings from users and then express those, sometimes directly in the application, but certainly in prototypes and things like that. So as a long back, like context setting for everyone, but I think that the profile of designer that we think about as a software designer is, from my view, not new. It looks exactly like the profile of designers we were hiring in 2010. But that's not like every team. Like our teams are somewhat, how would I say, rare, but not unique, like the way we operate. Because we really bias towards designers who also want to write software. They identify as designer first, but they're just as much like a front-end engineer or something, and they're harder to find, and whatever, but we do the work to find them and then enable their success inside our organization. So to me, this profile that's kind of blurry in this way isn't new. But the way in which people who think this way can execute and deliver on the way they like to work, it feels more empowered now than in the past and kind of accelerated in some really cool ways. But we've actually built internally, so it's interesting, from the design team, we've created an environment that we call our prototype playground. It was initiated by one of our designers, who's also a very good engineer, or an engineer at some level. He probably wouldn't claim that he's great, but he's very good. And he developed this environment that's sort of a sandbox or a safe area where we can sort of easily prototype features, experiences, ideas, and then we create the documentation for that. We publish it internally. And we have product managers today who ship prototypes into the prototype playground that our designers sort of conceived of and maintain to express their ideas about how things could be better. So in a really concrete way, to go from sort of research or insight into something like this, we're looking at some new a way for someone in a large enterprise. This is often necessary. They have like a big wiki or lots of documentation to kind of identify if a piece of content, let's say a page in some way, is up to date or relevant, because you might want AI or search or indexing to use the most fresh content and not maybe historical content if you're trying to get an answer. And our product manager deals a lot with our enterprise customers, talked with customers, had an idea about how that could be improved, and then they're shipping sort of design prototypes to say, what if it was like this? What if we communicated it this way? We have our writer collaborate with them and say, okay, what if we change the labels on the microcopy on that UI? Does it change how people think about that part of the experience? And only after a few, maybe 2 weeks of them doing that work, do we have a designer involved in making the designs. So it's, it becomes blurry in this collaborative environment. We see this, we talk about our style of working as like jazz band style collaboration, meaning like different people take the lead in different moments. You can kind of start and stop and hand things off. And so because our mindset and spirit of how we work is that way, it works well with this sort of generalist mindset and kind of enabling and empowering other people to do stuff. It's hard to separate, the kind of the skills from the tools from the culture. But I do think that if more teams work this way, it'd be better. Yeah.
I have a question for Ben. It's more of a fun question, but when I was looking, on the site, there's like all of these, like we talked about, really cool experiences that you can do. So I want to know personally, have you ever, like, if you had to pick like your top, in the top 3 experiences that you've maybe got to experience, or even people you've been able to meet, I'm just curious who would be in your top.
That was a good question. It's a fun question. So I did I've spent a lot of time with George and Amal Clooney at their home in Como and in New York. And the reason why they would be up there just because how committed they are to the work they do. Like it's really now their life's mission. And I think it just came out that Amal is the only lawyer to ever successfully bring a case against ISIS and win on behalf of the families of the victims of that terrible terrorist attack in Paris years ago. So just like, I think that's the power of cause is it's like this really incredible connective tissue that when you're sitting around a table and you're talking about something everyone deeply believes in, it kind of normalizes a very abnormal situation. More on the fun side, we did a private dinner with David Blaine, and prior to the dinner, we were told that you can't ask him to tell you the secrets of his magic tricks, and once dinner starts, no more magic. And he sat down and said, "Anybody can ask me, and I'll show you how to do every one of my magic tricks." And I'm just going to continue doing magic for like 5 straight hours, and I love all of his stuff and seeing it up close and personal. And then I had the chance. So in addition to running Charity Buzz, I co-founded a charity called RFK Young Leaders. So it was a junior program focused on preserving the work of Bobby Kennedy, not RFK Jr., the original Bobby Kennedy. And we were awarded at one of their events alongside Tim Cook. And I met Tim Cook through the introduction of Bobby's daughter, Carrie, of being somebody that's like helping to preserve the legacy. So that was also a pretty surreal moment. But those are that. There's not many. Like we were always the platform and the workers, and like we let the people go have their experiences. So, every once in a while we got to have a little fun too. But those are probably the best. But I'm mostly like inspired by these people who like do what they say and say what they do. That it's not vanity causes. These are people who roll up their sleeves and like deeply care about these issues because of like their own shared life experiences. I hope that if I would ever become really famous or really influential, that that's how I would lead my life. So it's pretty neat to see that up close and personal.
I love that. Awesome.
Folks, we are just about out of time. Although, Ben, I think I might have moved to another question too quickly for you to answer Aaron's first question, which was about your future.
But I intentionally didn't answer that because
Okay.
I will share that in the new year. That's when I'll be ready to announce it. But Aaron, I promise to tell you right when I'm ready to share it publicly. Before you'll get sneak peek.
All right, sneak peek to Aaron. Something he'll look forward to in the new year. So he'll hold you to that, Ben. Well, I want to thank you both for the very stimulating conversation. Who knew it would be about design and so many other things? So thank you both so much for your time today. Let's give Ben and Randy a hand.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Randy.
Very quickly,
Thanks,
before you
guys.
go, I just want to say we do have another event because there's another month coming up after this one. So that's January 15th. We have David Rubin, the CMO from the New York Times, and Eric Ryan, the founder of Method and Ollie, will be the next guests on our Thinking Link stage. So plan to come to that, and we'll be here next month. Thanks again, you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.